Somalia is in a dangerous spot in the Horn of Africa. It's near the Gulf of Aden, which is an important route for ships. This narrow route connects the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea. Almost 20% of the world's shipping trade goes through the Gulf of Aden. That's why it's a good target for piracy. Somalia has a very long coastline and it's hard to patrol. After the government collapsed in 1991, the country fell into chaos. This led to a rise in piracy. Fishermen with simple weapons saw an opportunity in the large ships passing by. The collapse of the Somali government led to lawlessness and poverty. People were desperate to survive. The waters that were once their livelihood became another source of income. Pirates were a symptom of a bigger problem in Somalia. In 1991, the Somali government collapsed. The country fell into civil war. Warlords and militias fought for control. Law and order disappeared. Even basic services like healthcare and education collapsed. Somalia became a failed state. The international community ignored the plight of the Somali people. The country became a safe haven for criminals and extremists. Having no central government meant there was no one to stop the pirates. They operated without fear. The lack of a functioning government had a terrible impact on the Somali people. They were left to fend for themselves in a lawless environment. Many turned to piracy to survive. It was a desperate response to a desperate situation. Many Somali pirates were once fishermen. These people fished in the sea for generations, making a living from it. They depended on the sea for their livelihood. The sea was their only source of income. But they faced a growing problem: illegal fishing. Foreign ships were coming into their waters and illegally catching fish. Foreign vessels were coming into Somali waters and depleting the fish stocks. These ships used advanced equipment to catch fish in large quantities. Somali fishermen couldn't compete. They didn't have such large ships and equipment to compete with the foreign vessels. Their problems grew worse when foreign companies started using Somali waters as a toxic waste dump. This toxic waste further polluted the sea. This further harmed the marine environment and the fishermen's livelihood. The number of fish started to decrease, and the seawater became polluted. They saw piracy as a way to defend their waters and their way of life. The fishermen took up arms to protect their sea. What started as a way to protect their resources quickly turned into something more sinister. The fishermen now started attacking ships and taking hostages. The pirates realized they could demand ransoms for the release of the ships and crew. This became a new and more profitable method for them. This was a sign of Somali piracy turning from a local problem into a global threat. Now, international naval forces had to patrol Somali waters. In the beginning, Somali pirates used small fishing boats. They had simple weapons like rifles and grenades. They depended on speed and surprise to board their targets. But as they grew bolder, their tactics evolved. They acquired faster boats called skiffs. They armed themselves with rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns. They started using GPS and satellite phones to coordinate their attacks. Piracy became a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The pirates developed a system for managing their captives. They behaved relatively well with them, because they knew that dead hostages meant no ransom. The pirates were motivated by money, not violence, but their actions had a terrible impact on the shipping industry. The Maersk Alabama. On April 8, 2009, Somali pirates hijacked the Maersk Alabama. This was a U.S.-flagged cargo ship. This hijacking made international headlines. It was the first time in 200 years that an American ship had been seized by pirates. The Maersk Alabama's captain, Richard Phillips, became a hero. He offered himself as a hostage to save his crew. He was held captive in a lifeboat for 5 days. He was finally rescued by U.S. Navy SEALs. The Maersk Alabama hijacking brought the issue of Somali piracy to global attention. It highlighted the vulnerability of international shipping lanes. It also demonstrated the United States' resolve to fight piracy. The Sirius Star and Escalation. In November 2008, the hijacking of the Sirius Star showed the world just how daring the Somali pirates had become. The Sirius Star was a Saudi supertanker. It was carrying 2 million barrels of oil. The pirates held it hostage for 2 months for a ransom of $3 million. This was a turning point. The pirates were no longer just targeting small cargo ships. Now they were going after massive tankers. These tankers were the lifeblood of the global economy. The world had to take notice. The Sirius Star hijacking showed that the pirates were becoming more organized and ambitious. They were operating farther out at sea. They were demanding larger ransoms. Piracy was becoming a major threat to international trade. The world responds. The international community could no longer ignore the problem of Somali piracy. It had become a global crisis, demanding urgent attention. Attacks were disrupting global trade and causing billions of dollars in losses. Shipping lanes became unsafe, negatively impacting the global economy. They were also putting the lives of seafarers at risk. Crew members lived in constant fear, and their safety became a major concern. In response to the growing threat, the international community launched a multi-pronged effort to combat piracy. These efforts were based on coordinated naval operations and intelligence sharing. Naval forces from around the world were deployed to the Gulf of Aden. They presented a united front, sending a strong message to the pirates. They patrolled the waters, escorted ships, and disrupted pirate attacks. These operations depended on continuous vigilance and quick responses. Commercial ships also began taking steps to protect themselves. They strengthened their security measures. They hired armed security guards. These guards were specially trained, and their presence helped deter pirates. They fortified their decks. These reinforcements made the ships more secure and helped them resist attacks. They implemented best management practices to deter pirates. These practices guided the crew in following safety protocols and responding effectively in emergency situations. Combined with the naval presence, these measures helped reduce the number of attacks. These combined efforts were successful in significantly reducing the threat of piracy. Decline, but not gone. By 2012, Somali piracy had declined significantly. This decline wasn't sudden, but rather the result of several factors. International naval patrols and increased security measures adopted by shipping companies made it much harder for pirates to operate. These patrols played a key role in making sea routes safer. However, the underlying problems behind piracy still remained. People living along the Somali coastline still faced many challenges. Somalia remained a fragile state. Its government and institutions were still weak, and people lacked access to basic services. Poverty, unemployment, and lack of opportunity were still prevalent in the country. These conditions pushed people towards illegal activities. These factors created an environment where piracy could easily reemerge. If these issues weren't addressed, the threat of piracy would always remain. To prevent the resurgence of piracy, the international community needed to address these root causes. Military measures alone wouldn't provide a long-term solution. The decline in Somali piracy was a welcome development, but it wasn't a reason for complacency. We need to understand that this decline could be temporary. The situation was still volatile. Things could deteriorate at any time and piracy could rise again. The international community needed to remain vigilant and continue supporting efforts to stabilize Somalia and promote economic development. Only then could we permanently eliminate the threat of piracy. A troubled legacy. Somali pirates left a troubled legacy. They caused billions of dollars of damage to the global shipping industry. They disrupted international trade routes. They put the lives of thousands of seafarers at risk. But they also exposed deeper problems. Pirates were a symptom of the failure of the Somali state and the indifference of the international community. They highlighted the dangers of lawlessness and the desperate measures people take to survive. Their story is a cautionary tale. The fight against Somali piracy isn't over. The root causes of piracy are still there. Poverty, lack of opportunity, and political instability still exist in Somalia. Until these issues are addressed, the threat of piracy will remain.